In the last class, I think I have come up to section 34, which speaks about supplemental proceedings. But I can put it, instead of supplemental proceedings, it could be supplemental orders or supplemental power of the civil court to do justice to the parties. It could be meant that way. Instead of saying that it provides for supplemental proceedings, it could be taken as supplemental powers conferred on the civil court to meet the ends of justice. What are the orders that can be passed? And those orders are ordering arrest, issuing a warrant of arrest against a disobedient litigant, and also directing the party to furnish security, and also bringing the property to sale after attachment, and also appointing a receiver to take possession of the subject matter of the property. And in cases wherein it is necessary, temporary injunction orders can also be passed by the civil court and make such other interlocutory orders as it is found fit or felt fit in the facts and circumstances of this case. Therefore, these temporary orders also could be passed in addition to the orders that could be passed under specific provisions that is provided in the CPC. Take for example, Order 39, 1 and 2, that provides for issue of temporary injunctions. Orders of interim injunction can be passed under those orders. Likewise, appointment of receiver, there are specific provisions. In spite of all these provisions, which confers power, these additional powers have been given under section 94. Therefore, I said that it is an extraordinary power so that the court will not feel helpless in times that it is necessary to pass orders. Therefore, such powers have been given. It is an extraordinary power. But when a party invokes the court for such power, for exercise of that power, they must come with a clear case, not a case with no evidence, and also it is a frivolous or vexatious case. But later on, under section 95, what are the consequences of getting orders on a case which is unfounded, that is a case baseless? In such circumstances, if the suit in which such extraordinary powers have been invoked and also orders passed, like warrant of arrest, attachment, appointment of receiver, interim injunction, likewise any order else has been passed, and later on, if the suit has been dismissed, then the party against whom such orders have been passed in exercise of extraordinary power is put to all inconveniences, and including loss of reputation also. In such circumstances, the court can, at the instance of the party who is aggrieved, against whom such orders passed, can move the court for punishing that party, that plaintiff who filed that frivolous suit. That is section 95. Suppose if any order has been passed under section 94 in a case which is baseless, then the court can, for insufficient grounds, if any orders have been passed, then the court can pass orders awarding compensation to the aggrieved party. That is given in section 95. But these orders can be passed not as part of the original decree or original order. It has to be obtained by filing a separate petition after the case is over, after the decree has been passed. Therefore, a separate application has to be filed. Therefore, the compensatory part of the order cannot form a place in the original decree that is passed earlier in the suit. Therefore, these orders have to be obtained separately by filing an application. And in such an application, notice has to be issued to the other party. Say, for example, the defendant in the suit and also respondent in the application. Therefore, it is not, and it is, therefore, these orders have to be passed on separate application under section 95. A case has been decided under this subject, that is 1961 to MLJ 454. And it is only a collateral proceeding, not the main proceedings. Collateral proceedings in the sense not forming part of the original case or original proceedings of the case. It has to be separately obtained by filing a separate application. Then we'll come to section 96, which provides for appeal. What we call in ordinary parlance is first appeal. The first appeal is provided under section 96 after a decree has been passed by a trial court, that is by a civil court of ordinary original jurisdiction. Any decree passed by a trial court, that is a civil court, can be appealed against by a person who is aggrieved. Therefore, first of all, you have to file an appeal to which jurisdiction has been conferred under CPC. Therefore, from an original decree, we have to move the first appellate court for first appeal. Therefore, exercising original jurisdiction, any decree passed by any court exercising original jurisdiction, then to the court authorized to hear appeals from the decision of such court. And this appeal can be filed only against a original decree. And it could also be filed, this appeal can be filed against an ex parte decree also. Ex parte decree is also as good as a full-fledged decree. Therefore, there is no difference between ex parte decree and a decree given after contest. Both the decrees are same, as I have explained to you in the earlier classes. Then, in respect of one decree, no appeal could be filed. That is, a decree that is obtained by consensus. By filing a compromise memo, based on that any decree is passed on the consent of both the parties, then there could not be any appeal. No appeal could be filed against an order obtained on consent. And here also, the question of law in respect of a decree passed by a small cause court, then it could be, an appeal can be filed. But if it is below rupees 10,000, then it could be filed only when there involves a question of law. Only when a question of law is involved and the subject matter of the value of the subject matter of the suit is below 10,000, only in cases where the stake is below 10,000 rupees and also question of law involved, an appeal can be filed. Next is the difference between a revision and appeal. In revision proceedings, the power of the High Court is very much restricted in the sense it cannot go into the facts of the case. In appeal filed against the original decree, the first appellate court can go into the question of facts and render its verdict. And the first appellate court is a final court of appeal. The final court of appeal in respect of fact is concerned. In respect of fact, the first appellate court is the final court of appeal. Therefore, the first appellate court is expected to deal with all the materials, evidences, documents and other deposition of parties extensively and has to render a verdict. In case the first appellate court fails to do it, then it can be corrected by filing a second appeal. The second appeal, it will be noted whether the first appellate court has taken all the evidences into account and passed the decree. Therefore, since first appellate court is a final court of appeal in respect of facts or on the question of fact, it is expected that it has to deal with all the aspects. Therefore, it could be even stated that the first appellate court or the proceedings or the appeal pending before the first appellate court is a continuation of the court, continuation of the suit pending before the trial court. It will be deemed as if it is a continuation of the suit in the first appellate court. Therefore, there is a difference between revision. Revision only when there is a question of law. There is an error of jurisdiction. Likewise, if it is the power of the court with respect to the revision proceeding is very much limited compared to the powers that is conferred on the first appellate court with regard to a decision on first appeal. Therefore, appellate powers are wider than the powers conferred on the High Court with regard to revision. That's a difference. It is also permissible in respect of an ex parte decree, appeal lies. And also, ex parte decree can also be set aside by filing an application under Order 9, Rule 13. But once it is filed, and also the party files an appeal also, once an appeal is dismissed, filed by the party who has moved an application for setting aside, this setting aside application will not lie. It will be taken off file. Therefore, only up to the time when the first appeal is disposed of, this application for setting aside can be moved, and also the court can also give a verdict on the application. But in case the appeal filed by the party is disposed of, then automatically this application will cease to be pending. It will be treated as if it is taken off file. And in the first appellate court, even question of law that is not raised in the trial court can be raised. As you know, question of law can always be raised, even if it is not taken in the trial court. And you can take note, one particular absence of a word in either in section 96 and also section 100. In both the cases, the provision is provided for appeal under section 96, first appeal, in section 100, second appeal. In both the sections, who is the person who is now authorized or who is permitted to file appeal? That is not given. But it looks as if anybody can file an appeal. But here, you have to understand, though it is not stated so, in section 96 or 100, as to who is authorized or permitted to file an appeal, it could mean that a person who is aggrieved by the decree. And any person who is aggrieved by the decree can file the appeal. Even third party who feels aggrieved can file an application as a third party with the permission of the court. Therefore, any person who is aggrieved by a decree passed by the trial court can file an application. Therefore, sir, madam.
உங்க வாய்ஸ் கொஞ்சம் ஒரு 2 minutes கட் ஆயிடுச்சு சார். கொஞ்சம் ஒரு 2 minutes கொஞ்சம் முன்னாடி இருந்து எடுங்க. மைக் ஓபன் பண்ணிக்கோங்க சார். மைக் ஸ்விட்ச் ஆஃப்ல இருக்கு. இப்ப கரெக்ட். ஆன்ல இருக்குங்க சார்.
Right. Therefore, question of law can be raised anytime, and also though it is silent about who is permitted to file an appeal, it could mean that only a person who is aggrieved. Therefore, aggrieved person can file an appeal, it could mean. But when we say aggrieved person, even a third party who is not a party to the suit is also aggrieved by reason of this decree. They can seek permission, get permission, and file an appeal in the first appellate court, and likewise in the second appeal also. And one more aspect you have to take into account is that during the course of discussion of a judgment, there may be some findings given against the plaintiff. Say for example, a suit is decreed in favor of the plaintiff, but in the passage of the judgment or in the body of the judgment somewhere, some finding against the plaintiff is given, and in respect of which no decree has been framed or no decree has been given, but only the prayer as asked for the plaintiff has been decreed. In those cases, that against the finding, you cannot file an appeal because he is not a person aggrieved. A plaintiff who obtains a decree or whose suit is a decree, and in the judgment, there is some portion of the judgment which says that he is not entitled to, or any finding which is against him. And by reason of that finding, a separate appeal cannot be filed as against that finding, because no res judicata will arise also. No res judicata. That finding has to be ignored. For all practical purposes, that finding has to be ignored. What we have to take is only the decree. In the decree, if the suit is decreed, or if the suit is decreed, then any finding, though it is against the plaintiff, If the suit is decreed, then there ends the matter. There he is not an aggrieved person. Well, for the purpose of filing an appeal against a finding in the body of the plaintiff. Therefore, he is not an aggrieved person so far as any finding, a contrary finding in the body of the plaintiff is concerned. And appeal also could be filed only against that decree, not against that finding, not necessary. And therefore, it is we can say, we can ignore it. And also, the Court of Appeal, as I have already said, should deal with all the issues raised in the suit. It should not omit any issues, because it is a final court of appeal with regard to facts. Or on the question of fact, the first appellate court is the final court. Therefore, it should deal with all the issues. And also, it can rehear the case. The first appellate court can rehear the case as if it is a court of first instance. Therefore, all the documents and all the evidence it can go into and find a verdict of its own, untrammeled by the decision rendered by the trial court. It can rehear the matter and also mold the relief. Anything they can do. You can reverse the finding and also modify the finding. Anything. It can even remand the case to the trial court. It can pass any order. And with regard to the proposition that the first appellate court is the final court of appeal with regard to the facts, a case rendered by the Supreme Court is reported in 2008 5 CTC 358. 2008 5 CTC 358. And one thing is, an order rejecting a plaint under order 7 rule 11, if a suit is rejected, then we will usually say rejection of plaint. If the plaint in the suit is rejected, one can file an appeal as if it is a decree. Only a decree is given in those cases where the plaint is rejected under order 7 rule 11 and 12. Therefore, against that order rejecting the plaint, only appeal could be filed under section 96 of CPC. And regarding section 97, it deals with preliminary decree and final decree. In cases of partition, mortgages, and some other like cases, both decree will be passed. First, a preliminary decree ascertaining the share or ascertaining the value each party will get, and also even allocation of shares will be dealt with in the preliminary proceedings, or dealt with in the preliminary proceedings ending in preliminary decree. Then it will be followed by a final decree. Final decree, separate possession, money payment, everything will come only on the basis of the preliminary decree. Therefore, what is the responsibility of a person who is aggrieved? If a person is aggrieved by the preliminary decree, he has to be prompt enough to file an appeal, first appeal, against that preliminary decree under section 96. In case he doesn't file any appeal, then he will be at a risk. He cannot raise those points which he could have taken as ground for questioning the first preliminary appeal. He cannot take by filing an appeal against the final decree. Of course, it will be followed by a final decree. And when he can also file an appeal against the final decree. But in that appeal, filed against that final decree, if he fails to file any appeal against the preliminary decree, the question or the issues that have been decided will become final. Already become final in the preliminary decree itself. Therefore, he must question that preliminary decree by filing a separate appeal. He should not wait till a final decree is passed and thereafter he can file an appeal. In the appeal filed against the final decree, he cannot question the validity of the preliminary decree. And here also, a third party can file an appeal against the preliminary decree. Say for example, any sale is set aside, consequent to partition, and a third party who purchased the property can always question that decree by filing an appeal. Here also, a third party is permitted to file an appeal against the preliminary decree. And mean profits also. You can note down one case law regarding this. A third party to the decree, including a third party purchaser, can file an appeal against the preliminary decree. That is 1998 3 SEC 723. And in respect of that proposition, that against the appeal filed against the final decree could not take in the question against the preliminary decree. For that proposition, a case law is there, 2002 5 CTC 629, 2002 5 CTC 629. And in respect of decree for mean profits, of course, the court can, while rendering a verdict, directing a party to deliver possession, can by, in the very same decree, provide for mean profits. Mean profits nothing but the profit which the person against whom the decree is passed has enjoyed for long, and how much benefit he has derived from the property by keeping the possession in his hands till the order was passed. Therefore, that is mean profit. Mean profit is nothing but profit derived from the property by a person against whom that decree for possession has been passed. And the court will, in the decree, say that mean profit, inquiry into mean profit can be commenced, and also whatever mean profits found, then that has to be given to the plaintiff or whoever is successful. The mean profits, and when you read this section regarding this mean profit, you have to read it along with Order 20 Rule 11(1) of CPC. Order 20 Rule 12. Order 20 Rule 12 says that mean profits for more than 3 years cannot be collected, cannot be levied. Therefore, there is a restriction upon a decree that while ordering mean profits, payment of mean profits by a person who is found to be in possession, then that mean profits could not be levied for more than 3 years. Therefore, it has to be restricted to 3 years from the date of decree till the date of payment. Therefore, the mean profits can be calculated only for 3 years from the date of decree. But it cannot be questioned also. Mean profits, we cannot question it. As and when the preliminary decree is passed with a direction to pay mean profits, the question of mean profits cannot be taken in appeal in the preliminary decree. But against the main preliminary decree, of course, an appeal can be filed. But again, regarding the propriety of these mean profits or the extent of mean profits that is directed to be paid cannot be taken in appeal along with the appeal against the preliminary decree. That can be questioned only in the final decree, because the court has now, in the inquiry ordered by the preliminary decree, the mean profits has been levied for more than 3 years. That can be taken in the appeal filed against the final decree. Therefore, with regard to mean profits alone, if it extends beyond the 3 years, it could be taken in appeal in the against the final decree. Therefore, you have to read section 996 along with Order 20 Rule 12(1) of CPC. And judgment debtor is not precluded from contending in appeal from the final decree that mean profits could not be awarded for a period more than 3 years. It is decided in a case reported in AR 1966 1 MLJ page 67 Supreme Court. AR 1966 1 MLJ 67 Supreme Court. And take for example, if any final decree is appealed against, in those cases or in those appeals, any IAS which has been decided or in any order has been passed, any interlocutory appeal, and any appeal is provided for, and no appeal has been filed, And regarding those orders also, we can challenge the same in the appeal filed against the final order. This one concession has been given. If any order has been passed on an interlocutory application and that order is appealable, and in case any decree is passed, a final decree is passed thereafter, and in that appeal, this order can also be, the propriety of this order can also be questioned along with the main appeal. This is reported in 1998 for JT. JT means judgment today, 459, page 459, section 98. Then it relates to a decision rendered by two judges. Whenever we conceive an appeal decided by a two judge, you can only comprehend the constitution of a bench in the High Court. But two judges will decide an appeal in the High Court. And nowadays, the constitutional benches are made only in accordance with letter patent, or in accordance with the letter patent. Letter patent is nothing but the creation of the court by the British Parliament. It is letter patent. It is called letter patent appeal. Whenever we file an appeal to the High Court consisting of two judges, then it could be called a letter patent appeal. Section 15 deals with the provision for appeal by two judges or by a bench consisting of more than two judges. It is regulated by letters patent, but it is applicable to originally two courts, three courts. They are called chartered high courts. The chartered high courts were created by this charter issued by British Parliament. Therefore, the three courts are Madras High Court is a chartered high court. Bombay High Court is a chartered high court. Likewise, Calcutta High Court is also a chartered high court. These three courts came into existence by reason of a charter passed by British Parliament. Later on, letters patent passed and other high courts were created. But these three courts were original courts established by British Parliament under a charter issued by the Parliament. But in respect of the constitutional benches, one has to look into that charter, or nowadays this letter patent also. We are following letter patent. And in cases where an appeal is filed, then it will go before, it is dealing, the section 98 is dealing with those appeals which are decided by two judges. But when we comprehend this situation, you have to consider two periods. That period is one before 1928, and after 1928. Before 1928, the section 98 was in force, but now section 98 has been amended. After an amendment act was passed and a new proviso was introduced as subsection 3. Subsection 3 of 98 is an amendment brought in the year 1928. There were two situations will arise in respect of cases that have been decided before 1928 and after 1928. But according to 1928, as it originally stood was, whenever an appeal is filed by two judges and the two judges differ on a question of law, and then they have to state that difference of opinion and also narrate the question of fact, and then send it to another court or another judge for the purpose of disposal. But if there is a question of law, but on the question of facts, they cannot. If on the question of facts, if the two judges now differ, then those judges who is in favor of the decree that is under appeal will be confirmed. But in respect of a question of law, they can always refer. but provided they must frame the question of law and also on which point they differ, then only they can refer it. But if they don't refer it, then also the decree passed by the lower court or by a single judge will be enforceable. That it will be treated as if no appeal has been filed and no order in the appeal has been passed. Therefore, before 1996, the difference is there. But after 1998, an amendment has been carried out or brought in, which says nothing in this section be deemed to alter or otherwise affect any provision of the letters patent of any court. But one illustration is A obtains a decree against B. B appeals to the district court and appeal dismissed. And B appeals to High Court, heard by a bench of 2 judges. And the 2 judges differ on a point of law and deliver judgments without any intervention. One holding that the appeal shall be allowed and the other holding that it should be dismissed. The holding that it should be dismissed, the dissenting judgment operate as confirming the decree of the district court. This is before 1928. Suppose if the 2 judges differ on a question of law and they left the matter as such without referring to another judge and without even narrating or now framing the question of law, then it will be taken as if the judgment of the trial court is confirmed by the dissenting judge. This is the situation prior to 1998. And after 1998, this amendment has been brought in. I will read it. Nothing in this section be deemed to alter or otherwise affect any provision of the letters patent of any high court. Here, under letter patent, section 36 speaks about allocation of judges or allocation of work to the division bench, and also power of the division bench is mentioned in section 36 of the letters patent. Here now I will visualize a situation. Here, before 1928, I told you that there were 2 situations possible. Here, in 1928, if a decree has been passed by the subcourt and appeal filed, and against that appeal, against that decree, an appeal has been filed, and that comes up before 2 judges. And if the situation is before 1928, then the 2 judges differ, and it is not referred to a 3rd judge. After framing a question of law, then the decree passed by the lower court will be confirmed by the use of applying the dissenting judgment. But after 1928, if the decree is passed by the lower court and it comes to the appeal before a division bench, and the division bench under section 36 suppose deals with that appeal, then if the division bench differs, the 2 judges differ, then even without a reference and even without framing the question of law, if they differ on the appeal or on the decision rendered by the lower court, it will automatically go to a single judge. And if the single judge decides, then the decision of the single judge will be final. This is section 36. Therefore, there is a marked difference between the situation before 1928, that is before the amendment, and after the amendment. Therefore, now the question, it is after amendment. Now the Madras High Court, in their decision, has taken a view that after the amendment in 2028, there is no difference between the decree appealed against that comes from a subordinate court and also a judge, and also an appeal filed against a judgment of a single judge in the High Court. There were a distinction was sought to be created by saying that in respect of decrees that is appealed against comes from the subcourt or a court subordinate to the High Court, and also in respect of a decree issued by a judge of the High Court in the original side, then there was it was sought to be differentiated. Now, by reason of the Madras High Court judgment, the Honorable High Court of Madras held, no, there cannot be any difference after the amendment came into force, whether it is in respect of an appeal filed against a decree passed by a court subordinate to the High Court, and also an appeal filed against a decree which is passed by a single judge of the High Court. There cannot be any difference. The section 36 will apply to all those cases. If the section 36 of the letters patent is applied, then automatically the restriction in section 90, section 98 will go away. There's no restriction at all. In cases of appeal from both the decrees, one passed by a court subordinate to the High Court and a judge of the High Court, in both the appeals, the same yardstick will be applied by reason of section 36. And also it is rendered elaborately by the Honorable High Court in a case that is reported in AR 1929, Madras 641. Therefore, whether it is an appeal arising from a decree of a lower court or a decree issued by a single judge of the Honorable High Court, the disposal of the case by two judges is governed only by section 36. And in case of any difference between the two judges, then automatically, even without framing the question of law, it will go before a single judge, and whatever verdict rendered by the single judge will become final. Therefore, there is a vast difference between section 92 and also 36. Now I can say section 98 has now become absolute. After 1928 amendment, only 36 section 36 of the details patent alone will apply. Therefore, here the difference you can take note. Under section 98, reference to a third judge in the event of a difference of opinion is optional. The judge can refer it to a third judge, or the judges can refer it to a third judge in the event of their dissent, and also only when they frame the question of law. There were two conditions. There must be a difference between two judges, and they failed to frame the question of law on which they differ. And also over and above, they must refer it to the third judge. Otherwise, the trial court or the decree passed by the lower court will become final. But in case under section 36 or in appeal under 36, the reference is compulsory, and there is no need to frame the question of law, and also there is no need to even say on what point of law they differ. It will be automatically posted before the third judge. The reference is compulsory, obligatory. It's a question of difference. And also, next we come to section 99. What are the powers of the appellate court, and also under what circumstances the appellate court will reverse or will deal with the decree. Suppose if the appellate court finds that the appeal has been filed only questioning about or small minor matters, non-joinder of parties, misjoinder of parties, non-joinder of cause of action, and misjoinder of cause of action, and also error, defect, irregularity, mere, you can say even mere error, mere defect, mere irregularity. If the appeal is filed only for these defects, mere defects, the appellate court will not entertain such appeal. This appeal will be rejected. But in cases where a party is not implicated, who is a necessary party, and then an appeal is filed, and in that appeal that non-impleadment or non-joinder of a necessary party is taken up as an issue, then the appellate court will definitely set aside that decree and send it back to the trial court, or even allow the appeal. Therefore, non-joint of necessary party is a must. And also in cases where there is material irregularity, but therefore I stress the word mere irregularity and material irregularity. In cases where there is material irregularity in the disposal of the case, then definitely the appeal court will entertain that appeal and decide it according to merit. But if you see, or if you read section 90, if that appeal is filed for reason of some defect, error, or you can say that word, mere error, mere defect, mere irregularity, the court will not entertain appeal. But in cases where material irregularity is pointed out, then definitely the court will entertain the appeal and pass orders on merit. And you can see in this regard, the reported decision in AR 1954, Supreme Court, page 340, wherein it is clearly held that mere irregularity, defect, and error will not allow a party, permit a party to file an appeal. But in cases where there is material irregularity, the court can always entertain and pass orders. Material irregularity. Material irregularity means a case has been decided about a question of law and also a jurisdiction, which touches on even the competence of the court and also jurisdiction of the court. In those cases, definitely it will go to the root of the matter. It cannot be brushed aside, saying that it's a mere irregularity. In such of those cases, wherein such a defect is pointed out, the court will take it as material irregularity. If material irregularity is pointed out, and if it is there, the court will always reverse the judgment. And likewise, section 99A, the order passed under section 47. 47 application, you know that is section 47 means questioning the proceedings of an executing court. And the executing court will look into those objections and decide it as a suit. And it is not as if the court will look into it as an interlocutory application. This application, questioning the proceedings of an execution court, and in pursuance of an application filed for execution, if any objection is raised by any party, and that objection can be taken only as a suit, it will not allow him to plead their cause as if it is an application for interim orders. It will be tried as a suit. Therefore, any order passed, that all, but in those applications also, no appeal can be filed for mere defect in procedure, mere defect in mere irregularity. Only when there is material irregularity, the court of first appeal will entertain that appeal. Then we'll come to section 100. Section 100 deals with second appeal. Second appeal will always lie to the High Court. It is provided under section 100. Here there is a difference between the power of the first appellate court and also the power of the second appellate court, that is the High Court. Here even we can say the jurisdiction of the High Court. It even speaks about the jurisdiction of the High Court in entertaining an application, like an appeal, filed after a decree passed in the first appellate court. Here there are certain restrictions, not as if we have unlimited power. The first appellate court has unlimited power, because I have already told you that in cases when an appeal is filed for the first time before the first appellate court, the first appellate court enjoys power, wider power than any other courts. Here it is treated as if an extension of the suit. It can decide not only the question of law, but also the question of facts. It can delve into all the material facts, evidence, documents, and also deposition of parties or the evidence given by the parties in detail, and then decide the case on merit. taking into account all the aspects as if it is a trial court. But in the second appeal, the powers of the High Court is restricted, or even it goes to the jurisdiction of the High Court in entertaining those appeal. Therefore, when a second appeal is filed, there are certain conditions which have to be complied with before the second appeal is entertained. That is, an appeal shall lie to the High Court from every decree passed in appeal by a court subordinate to the High Court. Therefore, any decree passed by a court subordinate to the High Court in appeal. Therefore, against the first appeal, you can interpret. Against the first appeal, one can file a second appeal, provided the High Court is satisfied that the case involves a substantial question of law. Therefore, you take a note. Unless there is substantial question of law in the decision rendered by the first appellate court and it pointed out to the High Court, the High Court will not entertain the second appeal. Therefore, first condition being that one must plead that there is a substantial question of law to be decided by the High Court in this case. An appeal may lie under this section from an appellate decree passed ex parte also. Just like in the case of first appellate court, which is also permitted to deal with an appeal filed against an ex parte decree. Here also, if an ex parte decree is passed in the first appellate by the first appellate court, that decree can also be appealable as a second appeal before the High Court under section 100. And here, in an appeal under this section, the memorandum of appeal shall precisely state the substantial question of law involved in the appeal. Along with, there may be many number of grounds for filing an appeal before the High Court. But among the many number of grounds, you have to frame such of those grounds which one should think, or which the High Court should appreciate that these are all substantial question of law. Therefore, substantial question of law have to be framed separately, and also it should be pointed out prominently among the other grounds taken for questioning that first appellate decree. Therefore, substantial question of law should be clearly stated in the appeal memorandum. And the High Court, if satisfied that the question of law framed by the appellant in the appeal is really a substantial question of law, then the court will frame those substantial question of law as a ground for admitting the appeal before issuing notice to the other side. Therefore, the court must be satisfied that there involves definitely substantial question of law. Though you may formulate any number of substantial question of law, but the court, after satisfaction, High Court after satisfaction, will frame its own issues from among the issues raised by the appellant, and it will say the reasons why it is appreciating that particular question of law, substantial question of law, and the court will regard the question of law or substantial question of law that is about which the High Court is satisfied and the second appeal is admitted. Therefore, the court has to frame that substantial question of law. But in case the case is admitted after satisfaction of the court that a substantial question of law has arisen, and the respondent, after notice, he enters appearance, but the respondent is at liberty to question always that this case does not involve any question of law, much a substantial question of law. Though it is framed by the High Court, the respondent is always at liberty to question that substantial question of law framed by the court. The respondent can always show that really no question of law involved, much less a substantial question of law involved. He can always challenge those substantial question of law. He can always say that there is no question of law. And as I have already stated, the court also can frame its own substantial question of law. Suppose during the course of hearing, if the High Court feels that some other question of law, of course, substantial question of law ought to have been formulated, or the substantial question of law really involves, and it has to be considered. Apart from the substantial question of law already framed, the High Court can also frame its own substantial question of law after recording its reasons. It can question any number of substantial question of law if during the pendency of the second appeal or in the hearing it felt that some other question of law is also involved, then it can frame that additional substantial question of law, and the reasons for it is recorded also. It has to record its reasons. Now, the existence of the substantial question of law is a sine qua non for entertaining a second appeal. Sine qua non, SINEQUANON, a must. There was substantial, without substantial question of law, the High Court has no jurisdiction at all to entertain a second appeal. Therefore, the High Court has to be satisfied about the existence of substantial question of law. And before admitting a second appeal, the High Court has to record the substantial question of law or formulate that substantial question of law, and that substantial question of law has to be decided, and it is arisen for consideration in the second appeal. Only after its satisfaction and recording its satisfaction, the second appeal can be entertained. Otherwise, the High Court has no jurisdiction at all. Now, about these proposition of law, several case law has been reported, or several decision has been rendered, both by our Honorable High Court and also the Honorable Supreme Court. Some of the cases reported are, kindly take note. 2012, 8 SEC, page 148. 2012, 8 SEC, 148. The other case is 2005, 10 SEC, page 38. 2004, 5 SEC, 762. 2008, 8 SEC, 92. Kindly take note all these case laws. If you read it, you can always understand the scope of the powers of the High Court with regard to the second appeal. And normally, one more rider is the High Court will not normally entertain a second appeal or intervene in the orders passed concurrently by the courts below. The trial court rendered a verdict in favor of a party, and it is taken in appeal. Appeal dismissed. Therefore, it is a concurrent finding of both the courts below. Then against these concurrent findings, if any second appeal is sought to be filed, then the court will not normally entertain it. Because after all, the case law or also the question of law all revolves around the question of facts. When the courts below, both the courts, finds that a particular party is entitled to the relief, and after considering the factual position, if both the courts agree with the contention of one party and renders a verdict, and against that concurrent finding, the High Court will not normally interfere with those findings unless, I already stated, and the substantial question of law has not been properly considered by both the courts, or even has not been considered at all by both the courts, then the High Court will always entertain that second appeal, notwithstanding the fact that in both the courts below, a judgment has been rendered in favor of the same party. Therefore, in such of those cases also, the High Court will intervene only when there is substantial question of law. It has not been decided at all by the courts below. Then, can you, in the second appeal, take a plea of bar of suit and the jurisdiction of civil court, though you have not taken it in both the courts below? But in respect of those two objections, that is plea of bar of suit, bar, the suit is barred. The trial court ought not to have entertained that suit. And also the appellate court ought to have found that the suit ought not to have been found. Suppose in case the court rendered a verdict, notwithstanding the fact that bar of suit has not been considered, and also another objection, jurisdiction of civil court. If the court has no jurisdiction at all to entertain the case, and if it has been entertained, and though these two objections, that is bar of suit on the basis of bar of suit and jurisdiction of civil court has not been taken by the other side or by the opposite side, then the court will always entertain that plea or objection in the second appeal also, because it goes to the root of the matter, because it relates to the jurisdiction of the court, and also it relates to the competence of the court. In those cases, though it is not pleaded in both the courts below, in the second appeal it can be urged, and the High Court will entertain in the second appeal those pleas based on bar of suit and also jurisdiction of the court, though it is taken for the first time in the second appeal. And it was also held that question of law can be raised at any stage. But I stated so in the when I dealt with section 96 also, first appellate court. In first appellate court also, you can always raise a plea on the ground of some legal question. This legal question can always be taken not only in the first appellate court but also in the second appeal. In the second appeal also, and it has been decided in 2003-4 CTC 670. 2003-4 CTC 670, and non-application of mind by the first appellate court and omission to consider the available evidence constitutes substantial question of law. You have to consider this. My statement also. It is a case decided wherein the High Court it is Supreme Court held that non-application of mind by the appellate court and omission to consider the available evidence constitutes substantial question of law. Here, I have already said that final court, this first appellate court is the final court of appeal with regard to facts. Therefore, the first appellate court is expected to deal with all the issues raised by the parties as if it is a civil suit while dealing with the appeal, first appeal. Therefore, the party has the opportunity to urge their case with regard to facts, leave alone the question of law. On the question of facts can be urged or canvassed only in the first appellate stage by the party. Suppose if that facts are not dealt with by the first appellate court, then the party aggrieved is losing an opportunity. Therefore, he can always question the same by way of a second appeal before the Honorable High Court. Therefore, Honorable High Court will deal with it as if the first appellate court has failed to consider the first appeal according to law. Law means that it is required to deal with all the evidence, factual and also documentary evidence, parties' evidence, everything the first appellate court has to consider. But by failure of those considerations, the party aggrieved will lose an opportunity to deal with the case on the question of fact before the first appellate court. Therefore, that is remedied by the intervention of the Honorable High Court in second appeal. But it is also treated as a substantial question of law. Then we will deal with, we'll ignore other sections, but in case I find time, I will deal with those sections also. But now you can straight away come to section 113, reference. Section 113, reference. Reference means a court subordinate to the High Court can always state the fact of a case, the question of law involved, and it can send it to the High Court seeking its opinion. Under what circumstances the court subordinate to the High Court will send up a case for its opinion? This is stated in section 113 under the caption reference. Even the court, which is dealing with a case before it, feels under certain circumstances, it can always send a reference for the purpose of seeking an opinion of the Honorable High Court.